My name is Anna Kilpack. I'm the Executive Director for NAMI Southwest Iowa, for those that may not know. If you're not familiar with NAMI, we provide support groups, educational classes, presentations to help raise awareness about mental illness. And we also just try to get involved in the community and promote and advocate for individuals that are impacted by mental illness. That's individuals that have a diagnosis and their family members. So um, we do a lot of things like help with community events and just try to connect and collaborate wherever we can. For instance, right now we're working with some veteran affairs offices to try to get some additional groups going to help our veterans. We're working with homeless shelters to see how we can impact individuals that are homeless that are struggling with their mental illness. So just really trying to get creative and figure out new and better ways to help individuals that are impacted by mental illness. So that's just a little bit of information about us. A few programs I wanted to highlight that we do have going on right now and things that will be coming up. We have our support groups, which is kind of our base, which we have a correction support group, which is for peers. We have 2 virtual groups every Thursday evening at 6:30 p.m. and a new group starting next week on Mondays at 10 a.m. You can sign up for both of those on our website, NAMISouthwestIowa.com. And then we have 4 in-person support groups, one in Atlantic, which meets the first and third Thursday of each month at 2 o'clock. We have one in Clarinda, meeting the second and fourth Monday of each month at 6 p.m. We have one in Council Bluffs, the first and third Tuesday of each month at 6:30, and one in Harlan, the first and third Monday of each month at noon. All the locations and information about those are also on our website. We have 2 family support groups. One is the first Tuesday of each month, that is virtual at 6:30 p.m. And then the third Tuesday of each month at 6:30 p.m. in Clarinda. Again, information's on our website. I wanted to share, we have a family to family class that's starting October 1st. And family to family is an 8-week class that helps to educate family members, friends, loved ones about different type of diagnoses. We go into the biology in the brain and what happens in the brain physically when someone has a mental illness. We talk about different types of medication, communication, resources, and help. It's a really good in-depth class that helps family members really understand what their loved ones are maybe experiencing and how to better help them. So if you're interested in that, that is going to be virtual on Saturday mornings starting October 1st, and you can sign up on our website. We also have a peer-to-peer class. We'll have another offering of that coming up soon, so watch our website for that. It's very similar to family, but it is for peers. So it's for individuals that have a diagnosis. It helps them to learn about their diagnosis and learn to manage their diagnosis and help themselves through whatever they're going through and give them the skills they need to really have a better quality of life. Then there's NAMI Homefront, which is it's based on the family to family class. It's a class for family members of veterans. It's typically offered online. You can check that out on our website. NAMI Basics is a class on demand for parents of minor children that have a diagnosis or suspected diagnosis. And then we have NAMI Provider, which is a class for mental health providers to help learn more about the personal experience of mental illness. And of course, this is our CARES series that we have every month. CARES stands for Community Advocacy, Resources, Education, and Support. And each month we hold one of these meetings, and it's a different topic each month. And we try to just really open up the conversation about mental illness. We mean these to be really fairly fairly casual. And so during the course of the evening, if you have questions, feel free to pop up and ask your question. Don't feel like you have to wait till the end because we don't want you to forget. But really it's a conversation. So chime in at will. Next month, the topic is going to be mental health crisis amongst teens and youth. That will be on October 13th at 6:30 p.m. And all of that information, again, is on our website. You can even view some of the past CARES meetings on our website. So with that, I will leave it to Amber, is our guest speaker tonight. And Amber, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name because I'm sure I'll butcher it. I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us what you do and what you're going to talk about tonight.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Amber Gagne, and I am an alcohol and drug counselor in Omaha, Nebraska. And I work in at Santa Monica, which is a women's treatment center. We have several different continuum levels of care in Omaha, and I work in the intermediate residential first 90 days of inpatient treatment. And so we also have a halfway house inpatient residential treatment. It's your next level up from the intermediate. And then we have a 3/4 way house. And then we also have 11 apartments that our women can move into that are fully furnished, 2 bedrooms, that really work well for the women who are wanting continued support and are doing aftercare through the Santa Monica programs. And so I have been there for almost a year. And I'm also fairly new into the field of counseling as well. However, with that being said, I myself am in recovery from alcohol and drug addiction and have some mental health issues. So I have personal experience as well as the trained experience as a counselor. So I am here to talk about addiction and mental health and how they both coincide with each other, and hopefully to recognize a little bit of the importance of treating not only one but the other, sometimes simultaneously and sometimes individually, and also figuring out in the process if the addiction issues could be causing some of the mental health issues, or is the mental health issues causing people to stay in addiction? So it's really a big spectrum of what we're talking about. And, there's still such a stigma behind both addiction and mental health. There's a lot of resources out here that people don't know about. And, I don't know all the resources in Southwest Iowa. I know a few in Council Bluffs, but in Omaha, the resources have extended to larger communities in our city because I'm going to call it an epidemic and crisis of mental health and addiction has greatly increased over the last few years. And so with that, we talk about both disorders, addiction disorders and mental health disorders, and they call that comorbidity or dual diagnosis. And, that is when a person has 2 or more disorders either at the same time or one after the other, right? And so this occurs frequently when substance use and mental disorders. I call it mental health issues. They still label it as mental illness in a lot of reading materials, but I feel that another way of getting away from the stigma of it sounding so negative is to address them as mental health issues, because they're having issues. It does not mean that they are sick, right? And so I think that's one of one of the stigmas that keep people in their active mental health issues is because they think they're sick and they're not able to get the right help that they can get. And that's the experience that I'm seeing working with the clientele that I work with. Who is affected? 7.7 million adults have co-occurring mental health and substance use disorders. And, of that, 20.3 million adults with substance use disorders also have mental illnesses. About 37.9% also have mental illness or mental health issues. And then you look at the other side of the spectrum of that, 42.1 million adults with mental health issues also have substance use disorders, and that covers about 18.2% of those people. Sorry, I got something popping up on my computer screen here. And so when you look at that, then you have to think about who's getting help, who is getting treatment, right? Who is actively advocating for themselves, or who is helping them advocate for them to get help. And not everyone gets help. The studies are showing that 52.5% of those with co-occurring conditions, meaning either mental health and substance use, they are not receiving treatment in any ways. And that could be because they don't know about the resources. That could be because lack of insurance. And that could be because of fear of facing the reality that something is wrong and they don't know what it is. So reaching out for help in general, there's a fear behind that for some reason. 34.5% of those co-occurring conditions do receive mental health care only, and they don't treat the substance use. So they may be going to therapy, but they're also still using some sort of substance, whether it be alcohol, smoking marijuana, or taking extra pills than there's prescribed. Many different factors come into that. 9.1% with co-occurring conditions do receive both mental health care and substance use treatment. And that's a really small number if you're thinking about the amount of people who are having issues in both areas or one or both areas. 3.9% of those co-occurring conditions are receiving substance use only treatment. And what's really interesting and important about this is that I work in a treatment center that we treat the substance use only. We don't have a mental health person in our facility at this time, and we don't have a nurse who also has to work in the facility to help with mental health dual diagnosis. That is something that we would like to get to, but it does make it harder to help some of these clients in treating them, because I am not I do not practice medicine, right? Or that type of therapy. And so what is becoming more common is referring and sourcing them to the appropriate people in the community who can also help with the mental health therapy. And that's becoming important. I think it should be a primary goal when someone comes in with that type of evaluation, because some of our clients come in with just the substance use evaluation. Some come with both the dual diagnosis evaluation, and they still come to us for the substance use. It should be a priority to address both issues, as a recovering mental health diagnosis and, someone who was once in addiction, right? And some of the reasons that the co-occurring disorders did not receive mental health care is because, like I just talked about, they could not afford the cost. So whether they don't have insurance or they can't afford the out-of-pocket for their medications. There are resources in town that you can get in to see a doctor without, you could go to the emergency room, you can go to Charles Drew, but you still have to pay for the medication. So even if you're getting in to see somebody and telling them, they're getting these diagnoses of depression or anxiety, which are the most common diagnosis that we're seeing right now. Bipolar is common at this time that we're seeing, you know, they can't afford the medications. And then if you don't have the insurance, then a lot of these clients are not getting properly diagnosed because they can't afford to go to therapy long enough to find out that maybe they have some disassociation going on and there's a DID disorder there, or there is some schizoaffective disorders happening, but they're not able to have the resources to gain that, the help they need. So then what happens is they start using substances more to coat the problem that they can't afford, right? And so 23.8% don't know where to go to treatment. They don't know where the resources are. It's not just out there for them, you know? I will tell you 10 years ago, I didn't know of two out of the 3 treatment centers we have in town, never heard of them. No, 3 of them actually, Santa Monica, I didn't know at that time. I only knew of 1, and that's only because I knew of that shelter because I had been there before. And so the resources, if you don't know about the resources, then how are you getting help? You know, do the med providers, should they be giving those resources out? Yeah, they probably should. Should there be more talk about it instead of it being a stigma situation? Yes, absolutely. 23% said they could handle the problem without treatment. And so I'm sure that possibly everyone on here today can relate to someone, if not yourself, saying, I've got this, I can handle this, I just need to do this, or I need to do that, or I need to slow down this, or I need to stop that. You know, we try and justify and make excuses and self-diagnose us, right? Because we know who knows us better than us, right? 13.6% said they feared being committed. So there's the fear of going to the psychiatric hospitals. Some of these mental health issues, these clients have been to those places, those facilities, and have had bad experiences. So they're afraid that that's what it's going to be like again. In fact, I had a female come into my treatment center, never been to treatment before, who thought that we were the white padded walls in rooms with doctors in it. And this was just a substance use treatment center, not for mental health, because she had been committed once due to being in a drug-induced psychosis. So she thought the treatment centers, that's how we operated. So that's a real fear out there. And it probably stopped her from getting help for a long time. You know, 12.4% said it might cause their neighbors to have a negative opinion of them. I think that when we talk about the negative opinion of others, this runs more culturally than it does in general. There are many cultures out there who frown upon their family members or themselves getting help. And a couple of those cultures is the Hispanic Mexican community. It is also the African American community, and it is also the Asian community. It is also the Arabic community. There's a lot of communities that fall in line with, we don't ask for help. And if you go and do research on third world countries, they don't have the resources. They just throw their children, their family members out on the street to fend themselves because there's something wrong with them. Again, the stigma around mental health and drug addiction or alcoholism, you know, substance use. 11.1% said they did not think treatment would help. I think that when we talk about treatment helping, you know, the person getting help also has to be an active participant in the help. And that can be difficult as well, because again, fear comes into that play. And also you have to face yourself and your reality that there's some things internally that you need to address with either your addiction issues or your mental health. And that can be really scary, you know, especially if you've been having issues for most of your adult life and even into your childhood life, right? And some of that also involves heavy trauma, and that's the reason why people will continue to use. And it's also the reason why many people have mental health issues because of past childhood traumas. The last one with mental health care, who is not receiving it, is 10.1% said they were concerned about confidentiality. So let other people finding out that they may have a mental health diagnosis. It may stop them from getting a job. It may stop them from being a babysitter. It may stop them from, their friends finding out their true identity that they've been hiding. So very, very many stigmas around that as well. And so when we're talking about co-occurring disorders who did not receive substance use care, some of their reasons are not ready to stop, 38.4%. They're not ready to stop. They might be tired of living the life that they're living, but they're not ready to quit. They're not ready to get out of denial of where they're at in their lives and to press forward for something different. No health insurance, it could not afford the cost. We talk about that. That's probably top on the list. That's huge in America right now, is the lack of health insurance. That's 35.1%. 13.1% said it might cause their neighbors to have a negative opinion on them. Your neighbors probably already know you have a substance use issue, to be honest with you. So that's a stigma we need to work on, right? So I don't know how many people are really hiding their addictions. And so 13.0, let's see, said it may have a negative effect on their job. There are many millions of Americans who are what we call in the addiction world functioning alcoholics, functioning users, and they're afraid of their jobs finding out the truth, or they're afraid of not being able to go back to their job, whatever the case is, or that it'll prevent them from getting a future job. I hear that all the time from women saying, how am I ever going to have a career when I've been in treatment for 90 days, or I've been in treatment for a year, or I've been here, or this or that, right? And a lot of these women, have a background check. And so that also is preventing them from thinking that they can get the job that they deserve and that they want. 11.5, don't know where to go for treatment. So again, people not knowing about resources. And I think that, organizations like NAMI is really good at spreading awareness to businesses, to communities on where they can get resources and where they can go online to find those things. 9.9% said they had insurance, but it did not cover the treatment cost. That's something that I also witnessed at work, is that they have to fall under a certain criteria every 30 days. We have to update that criteria. They still have to fall under a certain criteria to continue to get services. If they don't, they will lose their benefits of getting services in treatment, and then their help stops, right? The resource stops. And I think that that's another problem that we have in America. It's our health insurance and helping people, another stigma. 9% said no program had the treatment type. So I think that smaller communities like Southwest Iowa is a great example of not having the resources. I know that Manning, Iowa does have a treatment center. I know that Council Bluffs has some resources and they have some shelters, but I'm not sure what they have for treatment centers. And there probably isn't a lot of mental health therapy as well. You need to be resourced out. So, here we have so many resources here that we don't fall into that as much as I think the smaller communities do. And so, just we're looking at it from a perspective of someone who works in drug and alcohol addiction. I have clients that come in, and some of them come in and they already have a mental health diagnosis. And oftentimes they're coming in from jails where they're not getting medication. They're not seeking the services that they need. They may have been in there a short time or a long time. So our first priority is to get them into, think healthcare, which is our one of our resources, so that they can be assessed top to bottom as far as medically goes. And some of them already have their diagnosis, so they can quickly get back on their medications when they stop using substances. And so we can quickly see if there is a change in their behaviors based on what the information they are giving us in their assessments. Some of these women will come in and they have never had a diagnosis. They just think drugs and alcohol is their problem, but their behaviors are not changing over time, and it is not clear as to what is happening with their behaviors. But someone who's trained in substance use, has to be able to have a conversation on, have you ever had a mental health evaluation done if they haven't, and maybe weighing if that would be a good idea so that we can progress forward in giving them the best opportunity for treatment that they deserve. So that's where I'm at with where I work with some of these women. And then we find out too that some of these women do need a higher level of care than where they're at. Their mental health does need to be the primary focus once they stop using the substances. And it isn't until you stop using the substances that you're going to know these things. Some of these clients exhibit signs of anxiety and depression, and they're isolating and these other symptoms that are happening as a result of the substance use. So then they come in and they stop using and they find out that I'm not having as much anxiety, or I'm not having as much depression, or the opposite happens. Like I just said, they come in and they're getting off of the substances, but their behaviors are actually getting worse and they're becoming more erratic. They're unable to regulate their emotions and they don't understand what is going on with them. And so we have to work with them to try and figure out, is there something more than just stop using substances? And oftentimes there is. I think that getting a diagnosis of bipolar type 1 and type 2 is very common with men and women who are who have substance use issues, and it becomes more prevalent when they stop using the substances. I think also another stigma that we see is women are getting more help than men with their mental health. Men are staying out there and using substances longer until they catch charges. Some of them don't make it out. And so that's another stigma that is out there, that men cannot get help for mental health issues, that they're just angry, they just rage. There's these other things that we're seeing with them. So I don't know, I think that it's very important to know the resources in your community. And if you have someone who is suffering from substance use issues and they have a mental health diagnosis, or you may suspect, or they may suspect that they have they could have a mental health diagnosis, then to advocate for them, help them advocate for themselves. What can we do to help our family without enabling them, coddling them, being codependent on them? What can we do to help them, and by giving them the resources? But really, it ultimately does come down to that person advocating for themselves. And sometimes we need another person like Devin to help us advocate for someone else until they can learn what that means, right? And so when we first come into getting help and seeking help, someone probably helped us locate that person or that community or that referral source to get us there. And then it's our job to say, hey, I need someone to hear me when I'm telling you that what I'm doing is not working. And that even includes, getting a diagnosis and later finding out that you just don't feel that whoever you were seeing at that time might have been appropriately diagnosing you. You still have to advocate yourself through the process. And so I don't know, I think that's about all I have on that topic. So, I think that they both definitely go together, but you have to treat one to figure out the other. And just like the title, does the chicken before the egg, what goes before the other one it can go both ways, I think. I think that it can go both ways.
Well, and that's what we hear as well. A lot of times the question I get asked by family members is, you know, and I always wonder, are they somewhat in denial, or is this wishful thinking? Is this, but many times they're asking me, well, can the substance abuse cause the mental illness? Can it have been caused by the substance abuse purely, without having any kind of underlying mental illness prior to the substance misuse? um, and right or wrong, my answer is typically yes, substance abuse can cause mental health issues. However, the majority of the time we find that there's typically an underlying issue that led them to the substance abuse in the first place. Do you agree with that? Is that something that you find? I don't know if you have any statistics on that.
Yes, absolutely. I don't have the statistics on that in front of me, but I will say that in the experience of being in this field as a counselor for a year and in the community for about 10 years, it absolutely is true that there are cases where substance use is a direct result to mental health issues. There is such a thing as a drug-induced psychosis, and that does happen for many people. And but very few are able to come out of that without having long-standing mental health issues. So they may have began their substance use issues as a result of past trauma that's unresolved, not so much the mental health itself. And long-term substance use changes, the chemical imbalance in your brain and your frontal precortex and all the stimuli low and small as for that to be a result of that, though.
Yeah, thank you. What other questions do we have for Amber? I don't want to jump in with my next question. I'm going to give you guys a chance.
I was curious if you have any idea. Obviously you know me, you know where I'm at, and you know who I am and my history, but how many people do you think, or percentage wise, or is there one, of people that have just the addiction, that have zero mental health issues, that come in for treatment or whatever, and they have absolutely zero, they get no diagnosed mental illness? It's like, because I think I make an assumption that that's got to be a really small percentage. Is that what you see? Do you see way more with mental health issues somewhere than, or are there any that come in with just substance abuse?
Yeah, I myself have had 2 clients that do not have mental health diagnosis or have not had mental health diagnosis, and do not seek out looking for a mental health diagnosis. And I would say one of the 2 probably does exhibit some symptoms of anxiety disorder, and maybe a little bit of depression at times, but is choosing not to go to a mental health therapist to seek that out. And I think that over time, that person will be able to create a life free of alcohol and drugs just fine, and also without medication for mental health. And then the other client that I have had in the past, same thing. She has a period of sobriety or recovery at this point, and has never had a mental health diagnosis. And she is excelling very well. So, but the numbers are very small. Typically, when you come into substance use treatment, there is some type of diagnosis that has either already been diagnosed or does get diagnosed while you're there.
You mentioned earlier about drug-induced psychosis. When someone stops using substances that cause drug-induced psychosis, does that psychosis typically go away once the substance is out of their system? Or can that have lasting effects then?
I think that it depends on the person, and I think that it can go away on its own over time. It can take several months for what we call the fog to clear in that psychosis, those distorted thoughts. Sometimes there's what we call blackouts or blank moments in time that happen in those, and then their behaviors. But there are also those who have lasting effects for years of that psychosis. And sometimes what that can look like, which typically does go back into the mental health diagnosis of audio and visual hallucinations. That is part of a drug-induced psychosis. So that gets mistaken. Often the person have mental health issues that need to be addressed. Sometimes it's one or the other, sometimes it's both. Sometimes the substance use audio and visual hallucinations, which then leads to some schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorders.
Okay, thank you. What other questions do we have for Amber? Or thoughts? Or just discussion topics? Oh, I think we just lost Amber.
Is that what happened?
She was having some connection issues.
Yeah, I could.
Off, so
I could tell that, and then oh, she said it threw her, it kicked her out.
Okay. Well, if she has a connection, she can rejoin while we're waiting, or just even to finish up. I'd just like to open up the discussion about, what is your understanding of the whole chicken and the egg thing? I mean, what's your opinion? Do you feel like the majority of substance abuse issues are caused by a underlying mental health issue? I just raise your hand, I guess, if you feel like that's the.
I don't know if it matters.
Okay.
They both need treatment.
Absolutely, they both need treatment.
Yeah. And so I don't know if.
Well, and I guess in my mind, where I go is it matters, in my opinion, because if we know that that's typically the case in the majority of the cases, we can do more prevention work, right? If we do a better job of advocating for mental health treatment and reducing stigma so people are open to getting help, then maybe we can reduce that substance abuse percentage dramatically. I guess that's where I see it matters. Once someone has, struggles with substance abuse, then yeah, it doesn't matter. They both need treatment. Absolutely. I noticed she also mentioned the diagnosis of bipolar is very frequently seen in the world of substance abuse. I also know that diagnosis is very common for individuals that have that diagnosis to stop taking their medications once they feel better. you know, and the higher functioning you are, I think the more likely that is typically. But you know, the medications work and you start to feel better and you think, oh, I got this, you know, I don't need these medications anymore. And then people stop using the medications and then a lot of times can fall back on that substance abuse, you know, to try to self-medicate and cope with whatever's going on. So I just think it's worth mentioning that helping individuals understand how the medications work and why they're important, again, can provide some prevention there. What else?
I know that I agree that bipolar is a huge one that with or without any substance use being a component, there is, from when I studied in college, I learned about that particular diagnosis and why people stop taking medication for it is because, well, the way that it was explained to me is because when they're with that diagnosis, they get like this feeling of being high. And when they start getting treated for that, it kind of levels them out because they have those periods of extreme highs and extreme lows, and medication typically, you know, levels them out, and they don't like that, or they get tired of it, they get bored with it. And I know of a lot of, no, I shouldn't say a lot, I have a friend that has that diagnosis and will stay on her meds for years, but then all of a sudden will just stop taking them. And she will just, you know, be very erratic. And I have a family member that has that diagnosis that has refused to take any medication for it. It's, yeah, it's just super interesting with that one in particular, because it's like getting high is what I was told. Not having that diagnosis, I don't know what that really feels like. So, but I know what I'm a recovering drug addict, so I know what it's like to be high. So if that's what's happening with that particular diagnosis, I totally understand why they would stop taking their medicine, you know, like if that's causing them to not feel that anymore. Yeah, is Amber's back.
Oh, sorry. I obviously lost connection and then I was trying to get on my phone. And so here I am. I'm back. I apologize for that.
Okay, welcome back. We're just continuing on with the discussion while you're gone. So
Devin was texting me and she said, is your connection okay? And then I lost you.
And then all this, yeah.
So anyways, I don't even remember what I was talking about in that present moment.
That's okay. I think we had kind of buttoned that up, but
okay.
We were just talking about, you had mentioned earlier that there's a lot of individuals that have a diagnosis of bipolar that struggle with substance misuse. So, and we were talking about some of the whys potentially, you know, why they don't like to take their medication and or stay on their medication, because it kind of goes along with that diagnosis. Like Devin was saying, that medication can sometimes blunt that natural euphoric effect of the illness, and then it can, sometimes people feel like it dampens their creativity, or it you know, just kind of dulls their senses and their joy in life, and so they don't like to take the medication because it levels out those manic episodes. And yeah.
Absolutely. That's exactly what some of the medications do for people who are getting these diagnoses, and they start taking their medications. And at first they think they're feeling better because the chaos leaves and they're looking for, you know, the mania to go down. But then you almost start to miss the mania, you know, because you're used to that, whether it's a high or a low. Typically the high mania is what we miss, not the low. So we think that the medication is working well for us when we're not feeling so depressed. But now we're also feeling, like you just said, that lull where we're just like, oh, okay, life is all right now. It's not exciting, you know, when the medication is working. And they're not used to that because one, they might have been misdiagnosed for so long, or two, they continue to not take their medications as prescribed. And the other thing that goes with that too is that it's not going to work overnight, right? We have to, there's a trial and error with a lot of these medications per patient, per client, and what works for one person might not work for the next. And you have to, again, advocate for yourself and be willing to go through the process. Just like getting off of substance use, you have to go through the process of getting on the correct medications. And so that can be really difficult. And so then when they do get fined, what's working for them, they're on it for a period of time. And then what does our brain tell us? Our sick brains, as I call it, it tells us, I'm doing well, I'm fine, I don't need the medication anymore. And so then they stop taking the medication again because of several reasons. One, they feel fine, they feel evened out, they miss the mania. And then next thing you know, they're relapsing on other things because they're not taking their medications again because they can't handle the mania. So now they have to, they don't want to tell their providers that, oh, I kind of messed up again. I stopped taking my medications. I'm feeling what we'll say is insane. We don't like to use that word, but that's how we feel. Right. And so, there's just so many things that go with that. The other thing about the bipolar diagnosis that I'm finding is, sometimes patients and clients are getting diagnosed when they're not sober and they're not being honest with their providers. And so when they're not sober, they're not being honest with their providers. They're seeing these manias, these up and downs, or the symptoms that they're telling their providers, and they're getting a mental health diagnosis that is not correct, which is another reason why you have to treat one illness before you can treat the other. It is so important to remain abstinent and get sober so you can get a proper diagnosis for your mental health if you feel you have some mental health issues happening.
Yep. Well
Yeah.
said.
Yeah, that's probably the most common one that I see is the bipolar one that does. Again, I'm not a mental health practitioner, but I see a lot of misdiagnosis happening because you're not being honest with them about being sober, and so, yeah.
What advice do you have for family members or friends of loved ones that are currently using and are reluctant to get help, that don't want to admit that there's an issue? What advice do you have for them?
My number one advice is stop enabling them if you are doing so.
And qualify that for me.
So I'm going to qualify that. So enabling can look like several different things. Enabling can look like allowing your adult child to live in your basement for free and you're providing everything for them, but they are adding chaos and disruption to your home life. It's affecting the family members. They're angry all the time. They're, causing physical violence in the home. Different things like that could be happening, but you don't want to throw them out or put them on the streets because they need a place to stay and you will worry too much about them. Stop enabling them. If they don't want to get help for themselves as an adult, then you are not helping them by allowing them to stay in their addictions or in their mental health crisis. That would be my number one thing. Number two is sometimes tough love does work. You can look for resources for them. You can give them the information, but that doesn't mean that you have to, again, continue to take them in. They have to want to get help. And typically what we're seeing is you have to cut them off. You have to create these boundaries for them to get help because they have these outs, as I call it. My mom was my biggest enabler when I was in my early 20s, always giving me money, always giving me rides, giving me a place to stay, whatever it was that I needed or wanted, because I was her baby and she didn't want to leave me out on the streets. Right. My dad, on the other hand, is like, see you later, go figure it out. And sometimes that's what we have to do. We have to tell our family and friends, see you later. If they're ready to go to detox, if they're ready to get help, then give them the ride, take them to those resources, advocate for them and help them at that point. But if they want to walk out of the resources that you have given to them, whether it be treatment, whether it be detox, whether it be starting mental health therapy, then let them walk out on their own and don't pick up the phone for the help. You know, it really does come down to them being responsible for themselves at that point. And that's really hard. It's really hard. We don't want our family members to harm themselves or others. We don't want our family members to die, because that is happening on a daily rate. And sorry. And we want to help the people that are hurting, and we want people to help us that are hurting, but we're not helping them. The bottom line is we're not helping them. And so if the way that you can help them is to stop enabling them in whatever ways it is. You have to create some boundaries. And sometimes our families are stuck in this enmeshment, as we call it, where, the mother is the caregiver, the dad is the isolator, the brothers and sisters are stuck in the middle. And then here you are wreaking havoc on the whole family and just disrupting every single unit in that house. It's all about you. It's all about you. Why isn't anybody fixing me? Well, you have to take responsibility and start working on what it's going to be like to fix yourself.
Thank you. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking as a family member, and I'll say, we haven't had the substance use issues in our family, thankfully, but we have severe mental health issues, and it's hard. It's hard to set those boundaries. It's hard to, as a mom, it's hard to see them suffer. It's hard.
Yeah.
But you're right. Even with mental health issues, you have to set your boundaries. You cannot let the illness run your life as well as their life, and you can't put other people in danger, other people in the family in danger. You have to set those boundaries, as hard as it is.
Absolutely. I think it's okay to meet them where they're at. If they're not willing to get help, that's okay to meet them where they're at. Okay, I hear you that you're not ready to address these issues, but I don't have to participate in you not addressing your issues. Right. And you can still get education on, if he has a mental health diagnosis and you already know this, you can gain the education on that, and you can share what you've learned about it. And maybe he'll take something in, or she'll take something in and hear something, and one day we'll come to you and say, okay, I'm ready for help. And then then do what you can to help that person at that point. But when they're not ready, you can have that honest conversation. I hear that you're not ready, and I understand that, but I cannot allow you to come over when you're having a mental health crisis, because it's causing issues with me and the people around me, and that's not healthy either.
And you can take the NAMI family to family class and learn how to communicate better and help deal with crises like that.
Absolutely. Family therapy. Absolutely.
What other questions do we have for Amber before we wrap up tonight? Anything else? Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much, Amber, for coming and sharing your wisdom and being available and open to chat. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope that I was able to help someone on here with any concerns that they're having about themselves or a family member. So Absolutely. Reach out. Okay.
All right. Samantha, did you have a question? I saw you unmute. Oh, okay. Well, again, thank you. And I want to remind everybody that we are recording this. This will be available on our website. So anyone, if you know anyone who could learn from this and utilize this in their life, please share the information.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a great night, everybody.
Right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.